Let's go. Some basics to start the presentation. In order for you to survive, my English sucks, so I have to apologize about that. And I have a lot of things to talk about, esports and accessibility, game accessibility in esports, so it should be a little bit messy. And the first 2 points together should run us to KO, or kind of. I don't have most of the copyright for the picture, so I'm sorry about that too. And the good news is that it will last at maximum 10 minutes because it's a short talk. Indeed, my name is Jérôme Dipierre. I'm in the real life researcher in HCI, especially in video game accessibility for gamers with disability. And in my other life, I'm the founder, co-founder, and president of a non-profit association, which is called CapGame, which already had 2 lives. We funded it with 3 other people, 1 occupational therapist, 1 technician, and 1 gamer with disability. And our main aim at this time was to look at the hardware and software that already exist, and kind of software of hardware that already exists that can help people with disability or gamer with disability to access more easily to video games. So our main job was to set up a website and put basically the brain of the occupational therapist online in order to give an access to this solution to gamers with disabilities. So it was our job until 2017. And in 2017, a couple of things occurred, and then we changed a little bit the association. It was still a non-profit association. It was still funded in 2013, but we grew a little bit, and today more or less 10 people are working as volunteer. In the association, we still have occupational therapists, researchers, gamers. We have people from sign language interpretation or other gamers or whatever. The most important thing is that we have now 5 departments. We still have the solutions department. We added a department about testing, so how to first, to test mainstream video game in order to give information for gamers with disability about how accessible or how inaccessible is this or this game, to prevent or to avoid them to have to buy the video game before knowing eventually it's not accessible. So it's an important job because this information is lacking today. There is no information previous to the moment you have to buy the video game that give you any idea about what kind of accessibility is available in the video game. We have a research and development activity, little one, about especially profiles of gamers with disability today. And we are going on with this kind of research. We have a consulting activity toward people, professional, from the video industry part and from the people who are taking care of people with disabilities, like occupational therapists, physiotherapists, medics, and so on, because a lot of people are asking for having access to video game and they just don't know how to give them this access. So we are teaching and consulting in order to increase these skills. And the last department we set up was about esports. Esports was totally out of our conscious before 2018, and finally esports is a great place to be when you work on video game accessibility, because this is a big shared space shared by a lot of different people, a lot of different profiles. First the audience or the public who is coming to watch competition, matches, and so on. It's very, very huge. And when you have message about video game accessibility to give, it's very comfortable to be in this kind of event. The other big positive point is that you meet event organizers. And accessibility is important for them too, because we all know about accessibility of the building and all the problem people could have accessing different parts, and the problem due to stairs, due to the width of the doors and so on. And all these kind of problems are present when you organize a big event. And even if you think your event is accessible, sometimes it's not. Just a little reminder. Earlier this year, we were invited for a panel about video game and accessibility. It was located in a famous video game school in Paris, quite recent building, and everything seemed to be okay about accessibility, building accessibility. And finally, we arrived 1 hour before the start of the panel, and then we start to check all the paths supposed to be usable and accessible from the entrance to the room you have in picture. And everything goes well until we arrived just, I don't know if you, okay. When we arrive by this door, and there, just a couple of steps, totally useless, because there was just something like less 1 meter of difference of altitude between the altitude of the door and the place we were supposed to be as a speaker. And we had with us Kusha, who is a co-founder of Capital Game, or Cap Game, sorry. sorry. And Kusha ran in an electric wheelchair, so it was just not able to go down and take his own place on stage, and it was terrible. Everybody told us, no problem, this building is accessible, it's very recent, blah, 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 blah. And then it was not. So there is always a lot of little detail you can just anticipate theoretically. So be aware of the fact that you never know before you check it. So see by yourself if things are definitely accessible or not. Another big advantage of working on eSport is that you have hardware constructors and software, video game developers and publishers. And you have gamers, and you already have gamers with disabilities that participate to video game competition and eSport. Two famous ones are Bruley Legs on the left and Sven on the right. Bruley Legs is, both are players of Street Fighter, and they are very competitive. Bruley Legs is not able to move his arms and hands, and he's playing with a regular gamepad, only with his face and mouth and nose. And he is a very good player of Street Fighter, so just check on YouTube and you will have a lot of video about him, and it's just interesting. And Sven is also a player of Street Fighter 5, and he's just blind. So he just plays with sound, and he is also a very competitive player. So in terms of UX and accessibility, it's just very interesting to have feedback from these people, what they want, what they find, in order to finally make the different video games they play accessible, because they are not especially accessible at the beginning, and to discuss with them in order to improve finally your design and to make some idea pop for the next developments. In the same idea, we can work with players with disability in order to improve their experience by finding some usable or efficient adaptation, hardware adaptation or software adaptation. And for this example, we have this guy in an electric wheelchair who is not able to move both ends, just one end with a very little amplitude. And he was used to play with a PS4 gamepad, but with a lot of issue to access the different buttons. So we tried to, this time it was on Xbox, and we start to put an extra switch under his arm on the wheelchair, and it was just efficient, and he was very happy to have one button more. And this time we added 3 other switches just behind his head. I was not sure at the beginning that it was just usable for him because of the latency of the head or whatever. It was on the PES 2019. And finally, it was very usable. He was very happy to have these extra controls. And he did win the tournament by he win all the matches against some disabled gamers and some non-disabled gamers, and it was just a perfect story. So yes, it was kind of a good moment and a good improvement, and we basically have this action with the gamer in order to improve their UX and the accessibility, hardware accessibility. It leads to, most of the time, to question when we talk about esports, about the legal thing of the competition, because there are a lot of things that are a little bit touchy, like money, IP, and so on. So when you give better access to gamers with disabilities, to a certain extent, there is a lack of equity and a lot of question about where does cheat begin? Is it only a better accessibility, or is this a way to cheat or to finally be better than non-disabled people? We all have in mind the story with Oscar Pistorius, who was used to run with prosthesis and who was able to run faster than people without prosthesis. So we have a lot of legal question and regulation question about esports and accessibility in esports. And to finish, we did organize last year 2 events. As far as I know, it was 2 first worldwide inclusive video game tournament, mixing people with disabilities and people without disability. And we do it again in October, in 1 month, during the Paris Games Week. So if you want to have a look on this kind of event and how we imagine to organize it, you are very much welcome to come and see. It will be on 29 and 30 of October in Paris, close to the Paris Games Week on the 29th, and during the Paris Games Week on the big stage of Paris Games Week in the eSport Hall on the 13th for the final, and it will be organized on Street Fighter V, Forza, and PES 2020. Thank you for listening. Hope you're here still alive and ready for questions.
Yeah, I don't think we have time for questions. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a very short break, and please be back and seated at 4:15 so that we can start on time, so that Genova can catch his train after he's done with his talk, and that everybody who's going back to Paris, London, or Brussels, or wherever you live, can catch their train. So if you have any questions, go talk to Jérôme during the break, but please be all back and seated at 4:15. Thank you. Merci, Jérôme.